It's story time with the Histories, with your hosts, Matt Marie and Jen Dumas.
Presented by Anchor FM.
Okay, so I kid you not, these are the movies that give rise to the Years of Lead name that the long 70s are actually called. Are you ready to watch the trailer?
Yeah, okay, I'm ready. Here we go.
Tell me what you think. What are you seeing right now?
It looks like a streetcar named I don't know what the hell this is. There's two cars racing in a desert. Why does one guy look like James Dean and the other guy looks like he's working for Citibank?
I don't know. These movies make no...
What?
What did you see?
Oh, I love the pause mid-car going over the cab. Oh, nice. Wow. Where did this... what I'm seeing is there's no continuity because I don't...
It's just random violence.
Oh, my God. Oh, I don't know what that was.
Was it the scene with the lady getting the
yes!
bullet pushed through her? Yeah, it's comes out of left field.
Okay, so let's see. We shot people. Oh, my God. Right in the head. Holy hell. Now we're smiling. A lot of car chases. Oh,
so many car chases.
Oh my God.
This is it. This is the Italians lived through some of the worst political violence in the Western world.
God.
And they made these movies and they're like, we should name our political violence event after these movies. These are the Years of Lead movies, the Anni di Piombo.
I am stunned by the violence I just saw in that trailer. This wasn't even literally in the trailer they showed the guy get shot in the head. The woman's being bludgeoned to death with God. Oh my God.
Yeah. People think that we live in a violent society. And don't get me wrong, we do. So much violence.
I have not seen an American trailer where I'm seeing someone shot in the head or bludgeoned to death.
No. It makes you wonder what's in the movie that they're not showing you.
Yeah, seriously, if that's the teaser.
Yeah.
Holy crap. That was...
This is it. This is people watch those movies and are like, yeah, that's pretty much what we just lived for the last decade.
That is insane.
Should we just get into it now?
Yeah, I got to get over the shock of literally the violence I just saw. It's all right though. We're gonna be. That's so bad. Hey everybody, that's your host Jen Dumas, along with fellow host Matt Breen, and once again you are listening to Storytime with the Historists, the podcast focused on world history stories that are sometimes bizarre or violent, often entertaining, and always factual. Last week, we started our investigation on the strategy of tension in Italy by kind of exploring the overt ways in which far-right groups and NATO secret military forces tried to undermine these central-left governments in Italy in post-World War II. If you do want some context for today's episode, we recommend stopping and jumping into that one first. But if you are the kind who feels comfortable just joining the story midway through, like myself, feel free to stay with us as we explore the bloody conclusion of the Italian Years of Lead.
Yeah, last week was just all context.
Yeah, seriously.
So real fast, I feel by way of recap, just real briefly.
Okay.
World War II happens. The fascists are defeated, but then they're saved by the CIA, who installs them into high-ranking positions in the government.
Yep.
The fascist far-right forces join with NATO to create these secret organizations to keep communism at bay, both from outside, places like Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union, and within Italy, where there were resurgent large communist and socialist parties. Over time, those forces started to push violently away. The communists started to push violently away the different groups of people who were trying to gain power. And then eventually they just decided to try to take over. And a series of coups were attempted, but not successful. And that led to the movement moving underground. And that's where we're going to pick up today.
Yeah. So, your typical Cold War, hey, as long as you're not a communist, we accept everything and we'll support you kind of environment.
Exactly. So with that in mind, let's talk about one of the more melted, crazy aspects of this event, the Years of Lead, by kicking off with the discussion of a secret, shadowy organization known as Propaganda Due, right? Okay. This is organization comes into not really being, but into maturity in a lot of ways in the late 1960s after those failed coup attempts.
Right.
Right. And what we can really see from this is this devolution of the political scene into something much more violent, but something that's happening underground, covertly. Those overt attempts to create these coups had been staved off by a variety of different forces. And
Right.
now we have this shadowy, secret, anti-communist Masonic Lodge. So all the Freemason peoples out there, do you remember the Simpsons Stonecutters?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That was a
So-
great episode.
Exactly. The Freemasons are the real stonecutters.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
So these guys have in Western European history been blamed for all sorts of conspiratorial violence and chaos. Huge elements of American history, including the rise of the Whig Party and everything else connected to Masonic lodges. So there's a lot of history with conspiracy theory. But again, this is conspiracy fact. So this propaganda due, or we're just going to call it P2 for short, was, like I said, a secret anti-communist parallel government inside of Italy. At its height, it had 157,000 members, right? These are secret police, they're illegal spies, people who are within all sorts of government, paramilitary, and military organizations. And they're all being controlled by this puppet master, a man by the name of Lucio Gelli, right? He's kind of like this version of the story's J. Edgar Hoover, because he had all of these secret files. He had all the dirt on all of these different men, all over the country. And eventually he starts digging up stuff on industrialists and people in the economy and bankers. And this organization really and truly becomes just this like octopus of malice, if you will, that's operating under the shadows, like behind the scenes, under the shadows, whatever the metaphor is. You know what I'm trying to say. Right?
I do. I gotcha.
So overtly, you've got the Ordine Nuovo, the far right group that we talked about last week. They're overtly operating in public. You've got Gladio, which is the secret military organization being run by NATO, who's somewhat operating overtly, but not really. They're supposed to be a covert organization. And then you've got covertly the P2 Lodge, and the synecdoche that keeps them all together. That's Gelli, right? He's the guy holding this whole secret apparatus in one place.
That just seems like, okay, like and I know this, but like that just seems like a lot of far right.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of far right out there.
Well, no, I get that, but like we've got the overt, and then we've got the overt/covert, and then we've got the covert.
Yeah. This is what happens when you don't purge the fascists, when you don't get rid of the Nazis. This was kind of the design. And Gelli, he was a former Franco blackshirt. He fought in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, so he's old school fascist.
Yep.
Right. And even though he's an aged man, he's still very much a part of this far right apparatus. So here's a quote from our NATO Secret Armies text. During the Second World War, Gelli was a sergeant major in the fascist German Hermann Göring division of the SS, and only narrowly escaped the Italian left-wing partisans at the end of the war by fleeing to the U.S. Army. Frank Gigliotti of the U.S. Masonic Lodge personally recruited Gelli and instructed him to set up an anti-communist parallel government in Italy in close cooperation with the CIA station in Rome. End quote. Right. So these are like dyed-in-the-wool, hardcore fascists, and they're working in conjunction with NATO, again, ostensibly to save off communism. But now things are getting a lot murkier and a lot more difficult to track.
Yeah, it seems confusing to me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
and we're looking back on that.
There's a lot of confusion. So just keep in mind, and we can't get too far into the details. And this is the point where, again, I encourage listeners to take a look at the outline we threw together for these episodes, where you can really read through and look at all the information here, because it is a lot, right?
Yeah.
We got a secret P2 organization,
right,
led by a former SS Nazi who fought with Franco during the Spanish Civil War, taking his lead from the American CIA, right? Eventually, he expands the P2 Lodge to 157,000 members, right? And then those people begin to infiltrate all manners of Italian society so that they can run a takeover of not just the government, but the social networks themselves.
Okay,
and
so
eventually this entire apparatus starts to report back to U.S. handlers. Most importantly, Alexander Haig, who's going to become a huge functionary in the Reagan administration, and Henry Kissinger, one of the secret architects of the 20th century.
Okay, so all these organizations, okay, they are, whether they're overt or covert, their goal no longer is just to rid Italy of communism or, communist ideology or whatever else. Now their goal is to take over the government and refashion all of Italian society underneath their banner.
Yeah, and they're pretty overt about it. Again, from this quote comes to us from NATO's secret army, and it's collected by researchers and historians and people who are looking into the Gladio event. So it says, quote, Gladio researcher Frankovich, with an implicit reference to the numerous massacres Italy had suffered from, asked Gelli, quote, how far would you have gone in your campaign against communism? To which Gelli vaguely replied, number one enemy was communism. Prolonged silence. We are an association of believers. We do not admit non-believers. We wanted to stop communism in its tracks. Eliminate communism, fight communism. End quote.
Okay, so I mean, I get that, but it just seems like with the scope and how large they were getting, it seemed like this was about more than just communism. I don't know.
I think you're 100% right about that. I think this is bringing back fascism.
Yeah, this doesn't. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm there.
All of this comes to a head. All these machinations and schemes and coups and takeovers and P2 Lodge members and CIA operatives. Like I said, this is
like
intense.
Everybody's in. Yeah, like seriously, everybody's involved. Everybody came to the party.
It's like a Wu-Tang album.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. In 1968, all of this comes to a head when there's an election. All right. In this election, once again, found the National Front, the combined communist and socialist forces, winning a majority, and this time even larger, due in large part to the anti-Vietnam War movement and a period of labor conflicts in Italy known as the Hot Autumn. And it's in that context of a rising leftist governmental organization that we get the first overt act of violence carried out by the Black Prince. Remember him, Valerio Borghese, the guy who James Jesus Angleton saved, right? Where he's linked to a bombing that takes place in Italy known as the Piazza Fontana bombing, which takes place in Milan. It's a bank bombing. And that occurs in 1969. 17 people die, 88 are wounded. There are 4 more bombings that night. There are just random attacks all over Milan and Rome. And it's all immediately blamed on left-wing agitators. And it seems like the fears that many people had of a communist takeover were actually coming to fruition. Now, we're going to have to yada a little of this. Just know, listener, that prolonged investigations into the Piazza Fontana bombings eventually will have more linkages back to right-wing groups, Ordine Nuovo, and the types of military technology that we saw in our 1973 bombing that we talked about at the beginning of last episode that produce a clear link to NATO operatives. And if it's the bombing, the Piazza Fontana bombing isn't carried out by Gladio, there seems to be at least a huge assist from people who were trained by Gladio or got supplies from Gladio. This is the strategy of tension. Create some sort of false flag operation, blame it on your enemy to get the public on your side.
Well, yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, because at first I'm like, why would they be bombing a bank? If they're fascist, that would be but if they're blaming it on the communists, that would make complete sense why they bombed a bank and killed the innocents.
And the very first person who gets fingered as like being the perpetrator of the bombing is a far left activist, a man named Pietro Valparede, who is a communist and an outspoken member of a group known as the 22nd of March movement, who was seen by many like center-right and far-right operatives as being a true threat. And so the military police black bag this guy, bring him in, tear apart the organization. And then eventually, through following what's known as the Black Lead, which is these connections to Ordine Nuovo, the Piazza Fontana bombing eventually becomes the subject of strategy of tension, accusations, and then by 1972, there's this real strong belief that this wasn't leftist violence. This is
Yeah.
right-wing violence being blamed on the left.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Which
so
is,
this kicks off the years of lead.
That's lovely. So again, this idea that this fear of communism, and if innocents have to get killed in order to eradicate communism, whatever it's actually going to do, then that's fine. And that's what we've seen, right? I mean, we saw that violence in the name of affecting a strategy. Okay.
Yes, totally. And this is kind of similar to what we talked about with the Weather Underground.
Yeah.
There's just a laundry list of attacks here. And I think we would be incomplete and biased historists if we didn't acknowledge the fact that there was left-wing violence taking place as well during this time period.
Okay.
This all isn't just strategy of tension. There were some very militant, I think we could call them Marxist-Leninist communists who were down for the type of political violence that we discussed with the BLA and the Weather Underground, really reminiscent of what Lenin led in 1917 and 1918 in Russia, who were very upset about this idea that the National Front was moving towards a compromise position with the Italian government, had very strong anti-Vietnam War leanings, and decided that they needed to rise up to halt not just the right-wing violence that's taking place with groups such as Ordine Nuovo and being orchestrated by the P2 Lodge, but also just like this kind of drift from the left to the center. And these groups known collectively as the Red Brigades also bomb, also shoot it out with people in the streets. There is violence there on both sides. So the Italian years of lead very quickly devolves into outright street violence between various far left and far right activists who are trying to score points with the public by blaming various attacks, blaming bombings, blaming atrocities on one another, and then presenting their ideology as the one that's best for Italy, right? The popular voting bloc was more sympathetic of the left, right? But the fears and tensions that rise during this time period force some people to start looking rightward because they start to value security
over everything else.
Exactly. Hence, now we see the full strategy of tension.
Yep.
And even within this extremely violent, chaotic milieu, there are a couple acts of violence that really stand out. So in 1974, there's a bomb that explodes in Bercia in the midst of an anti-fascist demonstration, killing 8 and injuring and maiming 102. In August 1974, another bomb explodes in a Rome to Munich train, the Italicus Express, killing 12 and injuring and maiming 48. And then the atrocities culminate in the bombing of the Bologna railway station, which killed 85 in the blast and seriously injured and maimed 200 when a bomb was set off in the second-class waiting room at the train station. And this becomes the high point of the bombing campaigns and massacres, and really starts to force people to vote and act differently in Italian society. Simply put, people were just tired of the violence and started to look towards candidates who might actually bring about some sort of peace regime. And so politicians start to respond, which brings us to the primary event, the one that captures most people's imaginations when they think about this time period, which is a political assassination. But before we moved into that, I do think it's kind of interesting just to kind of look at how we had these series of coups d'etats and attempts to overthrow the government in the 1960s, and how there was very little overall political reaction from the public to these like overt attempts to take over the government. What got the reaction were these more flashy, destabilizing, disconcerting acts of violence that take place during that 1968 to mid 1970s time period that really start to get people up in arms. It's just kind of interesting what moves the needle with people when political violence and things happen.
Yeah. Okay, so were all these bombings that you just mentioned, these were all done by the right wing groups, right?
That would be the accusation, yeah.
Okay. And then
a series of investigations, and one of the things that was made clear to me in our research was that to assign blame for either, this bombing or that bombing or
Right.
whatever really comes down to who are you talking to.
Yeah, that makes
There's
sense.
a lot of unreliable narrators here. Politicians,
Oh,
and
totally.
criminals, and activists, and P2 members, and all sorts of people who are just, mafiosos,
Yeah.
you name it. They're all looking to kind of get back at each other, save their own skin, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so you can't really trust anything that comes out of their mouths. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, with the coup d'etats, were these all right-wing staged as well?
Yes, the
Okay.
coup d'etats, there's a very clear connections between right-wing operatives, the American CIA, and backing, stuff to the tune of, the CIA giving money in the 20-year time period that we're talking about here, roughly, 60s through the 80s,
Yeah.
the long 70s is what the Italians call this time period. The United States gives something like $65 million in an attempt to prevent left-wing parties from winning power at the polls. The operatives, the Gladio operatives who are working in coordination with the P2 Lodge and the secret military forces in Ordine Nuovo, these are trained by the United States. And the United States has a real vested interest in the 60s and 70s in pushing back against communism wherever it can, especially as things start to devolve in Vietnam.
No, I know that. Like, in Italy is not the only place that the United States is. I mean, God, the Western Hemisphere is literally, we thought, was our playground.
We're going to get into that next.
Oh, I know. But like, why so concerned about Italy? I guess is my question. Like, I understand. I mean, I understand like the Iron Curtain and everything like that, and I understand they don't want European nations to turn like, I get that, but that is a lot of money invested in a very small country in Europe to make sure it doesn't turn communist. I don't know.
It's a small country that occupies a strategic position in the Mediterranean.
Yes. Okay,
It's
fair enough.
Some of how I would read that out. It also, and this is my theorizing, my analysis.
Okay.
I think we also get into a European version of domino theory.
Yeah.
And if Italy falls, then what happens with France? Specifically,
Right.
France has a very large left-wing population. In the 60s, the de Gaullists and stuff are starting to lose power. De Gaulle dies, in the 60s. And so I think there's just this element of fear
Okay.
that communism could actually take root in Western Europe, while at the same time it seems to be on the march in Southeast Asia and, as you
Right.
alluded to, Latin America. Right. And
Yeah.
we're not quite at the second Cold War, if you will, the first one being in the 50s and early
Right.
60s and kind of tamping down after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the second one being with Reagan.
Yep.
I think that we're this weird interregnum of like the failure of détente and the fears about America's geopolitical tenuousness, and then also just kind of fears of what was happening inside of the United States, like we saw with the loss of trust after Watergate, the church committees, and the political violence of the late 60s and 70s as well. I think the United States is looking for a win somewhere.
And that makes sense because, I mean, we know the 70s was not really our decade. Well, it wasn't really our decade. We know that by the end of the 70s, at least some people within the United States saw us as weak. I think outside nations saw us as weak as well. And we're seeing an opportunity to strike back at, what they probably consider one of the great two evils from the Cold War. So from that standpoint, I can understand why so much money is going in. It just, in hindsight, it seems like a total, complete waste of everything. But
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And speaking of all this kind of tumult in the 1970s, it's actually the Watergate opening that creates some space for Italian centrists, most prominent amongst them, a man named Aldo Moro, who is a Christian Democrat Party leader,
okay.
who starts to play with the idea of letting left-wing National Front leadership into government as a way of tamping down some of this political violence. Like we said, there were people that started searching for ways to undo some of the political violence and to push back against this devolving situation inside of Italy. And Moro is one of those people. And Moro had been held back by Kissinger and Haig, like I said before,
Yeah.
who wanted to make zero space for any sort of communist. But the United States is in a more precarious position after
Right.
Watergate, and Moro takes advantage of that opportunity. He famously travels to the United States when he begins to play with this idea of what he calls his grand compromise, and tells the American national security apparatus that he's going to go forward with this plan. And basically the Americans come back and tell him, like, you can't do this. Like, you cannot, under any circumstances, allow communists into your government. This creates way too much chaos within NATO and within our geopolitical alignment. We can't have communism in any form as a member of any sort of parliamentary governmental system in Western Europe. But Moro says, like, damn that, like, we're going full speed ahead.
Suck
like,
it, we're going to do it anyway. Yeah.
We have to do what we got to do. Exactly, right?
Right, because it's their country.
Yeah. And it's this decision that Moro makes that eventually will lead to his kidnapping.
Oh, tell me it wasn't us. Tell me it wasn't us.
Well, the Aldo Moro kidnapping is very suspicious. All right.
Okay.
So let's just get out right off the bat, like right away. The Red Brigades, the leftists, the communists, they're the ones who claim responsibility for the Moro kidnapping after it occurs. Moro is going to be held captive for 50 some odd days, and 55 days to be exact, by the Red Brigades, and then eventually he will be executed by them.
Why would the Red Brigades capture somebody who wants communists in the government? That makes no sense whatsoever.
Remember, the Red Brigades are the hardcore Marxist-Leninists who view the communists and socialist parties working with the Christian Democrats as selling out the left-wing revolution. That's the official line.
Okay, but in all fairness, if the Red Brigades hadn't kidnapped somebody previously who was far less accommodating, why would they pick this guy?
Well,
because they didn't. This
is where it gets a little murky, right? Now, I think, responsible historical analysis, there's no concrete evidence or proof that can be pointed to definitively as saying, like, well, this is how we know that the Red Brigades did not. So given the documents that we have to assume they did do the assassination and the kidnapping. Because again, there's no smoking gun, there's no break-in that, like what we saw with the Weather Underground to find files and everything else. That said, Ganser, our NATO Secret Army author, does point out that there's some things here that are very suspicious. I'm going to just read a long quote from NATO Secret Armies to kind of break some of this stuff down, because this is where things get a little sideways once you start thinking about it. And this is where you got to put your tinfoil hat on a little bit. This is where you start sounding crazy. But I think similar to the Kennedy assassination, things don't add up.
Are you going to go through the conspiracy stuff?
We got to a little bit.
All right.
So this is from Ganser, quote, on March 16, 1978, he, Moro, packed the documents of the historical compromise, the compromesso storico. Well, I shouldn't even.
That was terrible.
Tried.
But that's
I shouldn't even have tried.
I know.
Into his suitcases, and ordered his driver as well as his bodyguards to bring him to the palace of the Italian Parliament in Rome, where he was determined to present the plan to include the Italian communists in the executive branch. Moro's car was approaching a crossroads where Via Mario Fani meets Via Stresa in the residential suburb of Rome where he lived, when a white Fiat suddenly reversed around the corner and blocked the path. Moro's driver had to brake abruptly, and the escort car following close behind rammed into the back of them. 2 men from the white car popped out, and a further 4 who had been waiting in the streets opened fire on Moro's 5 bodyguards. Moro, after his return from Washington, had become uneasy and had asked for a bulletproof car. Yet the request had been turned down, and thus the shots went through the car and his bodyguards were killed right away. One was able to return 2 shots, but together with the 2 other bodyguards still alive, was finished off at close range. Moro himself was captured and held hostage in central Rome for 55 days. End quote.
This is a terrible thing to say, but I'm just seeing the a white Fiat come around the corner, and I'm like, there could not have been a less intimidating car to pull this off. I'm sorry.
Broken down, and there's smoke coming out the back, and
I'm hearing people go, "Ciao." I mean, this is terrible. But I'm sorry, but I mean that's horrible.
So here's the thing. I just read that whole thing to you, right? Like the guy pops out, they shoot up the bodyguards in the car.
Yeah.
They close on these guys fast.
How did they miss Moro?
Killed. Yeah, this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
There's 91 shots that are fired, right? 91 shots in this really quick interaction. 49 of those shots are determined to come from one gun alone. All 5 members of the security detail are killed. They're all murked.
Yeah, but how did they miss with 91 shots? How do you miss the guy in the?
You don't hit Moro at all. They're shooting into the car. They're shooting these guys in the streets as they're trying to get out of their cars.
So not a single shot was fired at the car.
Osama bin Laden stuff, right?
Yeah, no, it sounds more like Star Wars stormtrooper stuff. 91 shots.
No, because think about it. There's 5 bodyguards.
Right.
These guys are popping out of the car. Moro's in the car.
Yeah.
We have this quick, car pulls out, causes this bumper to bumper accident.
Yeah.
Right. 2 guys pile out of the car real quick, start shooting. 4 more guys on the street open up, start shooting. They're in pre-planned positions. Right. 91 shots are fired in really quick succession. All 5 bodyguards are dead. Moro gets grabbed, thrown in the car, and everybody's out. Boom, boom, boom. Done.
Yeah. I feel like 91 might be excessive for 5 people, but I don't know. I don't shoot guns, so I don't know.
I'm not a mercenary. I'm not an operator.
I don't know.
We're not tier 1.
That's right. Okay.
We don't know. We'd probably get off like a handful, and we would have hit Moro with all of them, and that.
Yeah, and then screwed the entire thing up. Yeah.
But that gets to my point, and Ganser's point, and conspiratorial thinking points, which is the Red Brigades were mainly made up of college students. The best analog that we can come up with for the Red Brigades are the Weather Underground. Do you think the Weather Underground, based on all the stuff we read and analyzed and talked about in our last 2 episodes on them,
could have done
would have pulled something like this off?
No, they'd have been too busy first with orgies and then blowing themselves up in basements.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
They're doing speed and acid and practicing kung fu in the park. They're listening to the, Mother of Invention albums and, blowing themselves up.
Yeah.
The Italians are a bunch of kids. They're college kids.
Yeah, they couldn't have done that.
Yeah, right? Very quickly, rumors start to fly in Italy and in the Western world that some sort of organization, somebody infiltrated and pulled this off. These were pros, right? Maybe it was, Czech intelligence and the KGB. There seemed to be a lot of CIA markers in place.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of speculation that maybe the only group of people on planet Earth who could have pulled this off this way was Israel's Mossad. Right? We're talking about like tier 1.
Yeah, but I think Israel's Mossad would have been a lot more accurate.
I don't know. Here's where my mind goes right away, and maybe where your mind will go as well. Who in Italy has training from the CIA, from MI5 and the British SAS to pull off hostage rescues and run covert operations?
It's the Gladio, isn't that?
It's the Gladio,
Gladio group. Yeah,
Gladio has this training.
Yep.
They have a base where they've been doing this stuff. We've got linkages to bombings and weapons buried all over the countryside, and all these connections to the P2 Lodge and all the types of people who are running these types of violent actions. Right.
Yeah.
Now, witnesses claim that they saw a man named Colonel Guglielmelli. Well, I just butchered that name.
Anybody who's of Italian heritage or speaks Italian hates us now.
Guglielmini.
Oh my God! Now you sound like Mario.
I do sound like Mario. I can't do it, but I thought maybe if I did the inflection, I could say
it would have made better. No,
it's spelled Guglielmi. Like those are not letters that go together. I'm sorry, they're not. All right.
Yes, in the Italian language, yes, they do.
They do, but not in my podcast studio, my office.
In Denver, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy, Guglielmelli, he's a Gladio instructor. He specifically worked with the Gladio troops on ambush techniques linked to the Gladio base in Sardinia that we talked about in the last episode. He is identified by witnesses as having been on the scene. Yeah. I don't think that's coincidental.
I'm not really sure that's much of a shocker either.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Doesn't matter. The leader of the Red Brigades, a guy named Mario Moretti, does make public announcements. He does say that they have Moro. Moro was held captive for 55 days. Eventually, he is executed. His body is left in the trunk of a car. It's called into the police. This is where you can find him. The Carabinieri end up finding him in the car, and that's that.
And they still think the Red Brigades did it because this guy was compromising the.
Yeah. So the Red Brigades claim responsibility. What we have is what we have. One more coincidence, if you will, that makes people really wonder about whether or not this was some sort of inside strategy of tension job that was meant to destabilize Italy and further prevent any sort of left-wing inclusion in the government, a communist takeover, the sort of thing that Lucio Gelli and P2 said that they were fervently against. Moro was held by the Red Brigades in an apartment right next door to a Carabinieri headquarters, the secret military police, right next door.
And the secret military, nobody saw anything. Nobody thought it was suspicious.
Nope.
Oh, for God's
in fact, many of the kidnappers talked to these secret police members on the streets, shared cigarettes, according to investigative records that were presented. 13 Red Brigade members were eventually found guilty for the kidnapping of Moro. Many of these people had been identified as having been in contact with members of the Italian military police and intelligence during the time of Moro's kidnapping and were photographed. Yet, this was all supposed to be just a bunch of college kids doing a goof. Yeah. You know how college kids are. They get together, they do their vapes, and then they go off and murk 5 security guards.
Right? Like, come on.
Hold the PM, one of the guys who might become the prime minister, hostage for 55 days on their own.
So are we thinking that there were actually operatives that had wormed their way into the Red Brigades to do the work, or were there sellouts from the Red Brigades to the fascist? I don't know.
It's hard to say. I think many of the Ordine Nuovo members who eventually go to jail will point out that this sort of thing was the exact goal of the strategy of tension. And if you look at who are the winners are the far right and center right activists. The Red Brigades become the villains, and communists and socialists lose voting support. And in subsequent elections, we see a move towards far-right politics. Members of the P2 Lodge eventually become prominent politicians, including PM in the 21st century, Berlusconi. He was a low-level P2 operative during this time period, eventually rises to become prime minister of Italy, in charge of a center-right, far-right linked party in the 2000s. It seems pretty obvious that the left wing loses, and the entire state apparatus after the Moro kidnapping wrenches itself into motion. Roadblocks are set up around the city. Houses are searched. 6 million people were questioned in less than 2 months. Like when we say roadblocks, there were documented 72,000 roadblocks set up around Italy. 37,000 houses, to be exact, were searched. This is a huge...
It's a police state.
...crackdown. Yeah. And again, you just look at who wins and who loses here. The clear losers are the communists, and the clear winners are the far-right operatives. And it's hard not to connect the dots, even if you don't have the historical evidence. And some of the historians that we consulted their work for this episode point out that the connect the dots here does lead you to draw some conclusions that even if the evidence doesn't, prove the theory that the theory at least holds water. And in a lot of ways, I was joking before, but this is kind of the same thing that you see with the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
Where you have the official narrative. The official narrative has the documentation. Then you have all the other elements that are out there. And you think, well, the official narrative is not a complete picture. And I think that's what we have with the Moro kidnapping and assassination, an incomplete picture. But again, you look at the outcome and it's pretty obvious and clear that the communists lose, the Christian Democrats lose, and the winners are the far-right activists. And in that sense, the P2 Masonic Lodge that we talked about at the beginning, and Jelly, and the Black Prince, and Ordine Nuovo, and Gladio, and Kissinger, and Haig, and all the people who had worked tirelessly since 1946 to prevent communism and instill some sort of right of center, U.S. aligned, Western aligned government in Italy finally got their way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Moro's death. That's the assassination. That's the years of lead, right? When it's all said and done, if we go from January 1st, 1969 to December 31st, 1987, right? Again, the long 70s, this really long period of time. There have been in Italy 14,591 acts of violence with a political motivation. 491 people have died during that time period, and 1,181 people were injured. The Red Brigade terrorists were jailed. Right-wing terrorists escaped justice.
Oh, yeah, because they were protected.
Yep. The Ordine Nuovo in particular, and those linked up with the P2 Masonic Lodge, which was raided in 1981. A members list was found identifying 962 active members in 1981. Total membership was estimated at being at 2,500. Probably the most prominent name on the list of purported members. One George H.W. Bush.
No.
Yeah, President of the United States.
Huh.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this whole thing is summed up best by a jailed member of Ordine Nuovo, a man named Franco Freda, who said, quote, "The life of everyone is manipulated by those with more power. In my case, I accepted that I have been a puppet in the hands of ideas, but not in the hands of men from the secret services here in Italy or abroad. That is to say that I have voluntarily fought my own war, following the strategic design that came from my own ideas. That is all." Right. But with that said, was he free from being puppeteered?
Yeah.
I think no.
Okay. But here's the whole thing with being puppeteered, right? If we say for all violent actions or anything like that from any group in society, I don't care, far left, far right, center, when we start saying that they weren't free, then we are basically having this victim attitude, like we are always going to be controlled by something, therefore we have no free choice. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think some people are more easily manipulated than others.
Sure.
But at some point, people can stand up and say no. And when you choose not to say no, then yes, you are 100% part of the problem, but everybody always has a choice.
I agree. I don't know if I agree with this idea that a lot of these guys were acting on their own volitions. I think that to kind of borrow from an awful, awful movie, a lot of these guys were incepted. A lot of these actors were willing to take political action. I think that they were manipulated in a way that they weren't conscious of to, commit political violence that they might not otherwise have done without these nefarious actors and networks and pretexts of Cold Warrior mentalities that were existent during that time period. So for some of these guys to say like, hey, look, I did this on my own, this was my own thing, I don't think that that's true. And I don't think that the types of actions that they took were the types of actions they would have taken without some puppeteering to stick with that.
And I can agree with that, right? Because nobody saying I've done it is just a way for the other guys to get out of jail free card. I get that. I just, yeah, okay. I will agree with you on that one. Is that when you, especially if you're younger, you get into a situation that maybe politically you believe in, this is what I really want to fight for. And then because you're younger, you're easily manipulated. Then you end up doing things you definitely shouldn't be doing. So I don't think it's 100% their fault, but I also don't think it's not their fault.
Yeah. I mean, and you kind of look at this idea of what these, guys were doing. One of the judges in the trials of the leadership and the investigations, had this to say about the strategy of tension and the violence. And then we'll close out with another quote from one of the terrorists to give, the last word. But this guy, Judge Kaysen, says, quote, of the strategy of tension, quote, that's to say, to create tension within the country to promote conservative, reactionary social and political tendencies. While this strategy was being implemented, it was necessary to protect those behind it because evidence implicating them was being discovered. Witnesses withheld information to cover right-wing extremists.
Yeah, and I agree. That happens. Unfortunately, that happens a lot.
Yeah. And I just think that when you look at these events, it's hard to look at this and think that if politics had been able to play out truly, like true politics, like the debate and the elections and everything else, that, some sort of outcome that would have been representative of what the people wanted would have occurred. And I think that this is one of those things that when we talk about this sort of violence, we think like, oh, political violence, we live in these political times where there's too much politics. I would argue that this was a lack of politics, really.
This was about power. This had nothing to do,
Yeah, and instead this was just, people trying to orchestrate their way into society and then being protected by the highest echelons of power, people who were playing at their own games, that saw the Italian people as mere pawns, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the suggestion of one of the few people who was convicted from the right during the investigations and trials of the Italian years of lead. By the name of Vinci Guerra, who had this.
Well, that was better. That was
better.
I
think so too, right? I was practicing a little bit.
Yeah,
I had to make up for that horrible butchery earlier. All right, so Vinci Guerra says, quote, you had to attack civilians, the people, women, children, innocent people, unknown people far removed from any political game. The reason was quite simple. They were supposed to force these people, the Italian public, to turn to the state to ask for greater security. This is the political logic that lies behind all the massacres and the bombings which remain unpunished because the state cannot convict itself or declare itself responsible for what happened. End quote.
Yeah,
I think that's
true.
a pretty good way of summing up what happened in Italy.
Yeah.
One of the more grotesque outbursts of violence in the Western world, anyway.
Yeah.
During the Cold War.
It's pretty horrific.
Yeah,
but now I want to start getting into other. Now I'm like, oh my God, isn't that really what it is? Do we truly even have a democracy anymore in this entire planet? Are they truly representing the needs of the people, or are all these government just a bunch of officials who gain power and want to keep their own power?
Well, luckily we're going to be in Chile next week. And
I know, right?
That's totally true, and everything was fine because in South America things are just different, better,
yeah, right,
more peaceful.
Yeah, totally.
Siesta time.
No issues whatsoever.
All right, so Jen, you want to tease them out? What do you got? This is your thing. I mean,
I know. I'm so excited. I'm not so excited. Do you want to tell them
now, or do we want to wait for the next episode?
Let's just say that what we see in Italy is, it's certainly going to be duplicated to a even different extent than what we're going to see in Chile.
Oh, you're holding back, man.
I know.
Like, Italy's like 2%, and Chile's like whole milk.
Yeah, oh God, that's. Oh, it's so horrible, but I'm gonna hold off because I don't want to, no spoiler alerts.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tee him up a little bit. Like,
all right, tee him up a little bit.
This is like real you being a historian.
Yes,
to get into here. I've been telling this story for this one. I'm really excited. For this, and what you've got for the people. Your actual historian chops on full display here.
Yeah, this is actually, this stuff is what got me interested in getting my master's in Latin American history, because I could not believe for the life of me, my innocent little 22-year-old, 23-year-old self, that this was really taking place in the Western Hemisphere as a direct result of the United States. So I'm like, oh my God, I got to know more.
Yeah, dude, I'm looking forward to this. And we get to call back to something that we talked about like 2-3 years ago. We said we were going to do an episode on, and we finally are going to
circle back
as well. Yeah. So yeah, listeners, tune in next week as we close out our political violence series with a look at the 1970s in Chile, Allende, Pinochet, and maybe the most grotesque entry in this story that we have.
In fact, I can't go. I don't even know how much we're going to be able to really go into because of how horrific it really was. Like it's
our podcast. I think
that's true.
Right. We got to stay.
If nothing else, we'll get canceled. It'll be fine. What else?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, listeners, thank you so much for joining us again. And as always, if you enjoy the podcast, go ahead and give us a like, or what do you call it, Matt? The algorithm thing?
Oh yeah, post for the algorithm. I forget what it's called.
See, no, we can't even do it. I know.
Or FTA.
Or just let everybody else know you like our podcast and tell them to listen to us.
That's right. We're professionals.
We are professionals. All right, guys. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Bye.